Hello, we've got folks who are joining us. We're just letting people into the room, so we'll give a couple minutes for attendees to get joined and entered into the room, and then we'll get started in just a few minutes. In the meantime, while folks are joining the room and we're getting all of our attendees in, why doesn't everyone go ahead and put in, and we've just got a note in the chat, why doesn't everyone go ahead and throw in the chat who you are, where you're from, and then what you're hoping to get out of this session. So maybe we can incorporate some of that into today's session. And so again, for anyone who just joined, if you want to throw in the chat your name, what institution you're from, and what you're hoping to get out of today's session, we'll go ahead and get started in just 1 second. And also, if there are any questions that you have as you're coming in, just go ahead and throw those in there as well. We are going to have a session for Q&A toward the end of the webinar, and so we want to make sure we get those in, so feel free to throw those in as well. Okay, I think we'll go ahead. It's 2 after by my clock, so I think we'll go ahead and get started as people enter in their information in the chat. If you just joined, go ahead and throw your name, your institution you're from, and what you're hoping to get out of today's session into the discussion, and we will go ahead and get started. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. It's great to have so many people attending. This will be an interactive session that we're covering on labor market data and how it informs workforce-aligned experiential learning. I'm sure that sounds really compelling and fun, how we're going to use data and workforce-aligned experiential learning, but I promise you this is going to be a fun session. And so on that note, we want this to be very interactive, so there's going to be opportunities to put questions and discussion in the chat. We're also going to have some polls that we do throughout. So at any point through this session, if you want to put some questions in the chat, feel free to put them in. We will get to questions at the end, and so we'd love to see those coming throughout the entire session. So we can go ahead and get started. First, I'll start with introductions. First person that we have speaking today, who needs no introduction, but it's Charles Ansell with Complete College America. He has dedicated his career to educational justice and equity. In his current role, he uses research to advocate for legislation and resources that help students graduate college, closing socioeconomic, racial, or generational disparities that exist in college completion. As the Chief Operating Officer of the Community College System of New Hampshire, he directed research, strategy, finance, and technology for a statewide system of colleges. In this role, he developed data and reporting infrastructure that enabled an evidence-driven policy agenda to influence state legislation and appropriations to higher education. Prior to this, Charles led student success efforts at City Colleges of Chicago, where he oversaw the development of a pathways program that ensured students enrolled for classes along semester-by-semester plans aligned with individual academic aspirations. He holds an MS in Business Information Technology from DePaul University and a BA from Carleton College. Next speaking today, we have Josh Mitchell with Ripen. Josh is a seasoned leader with over 20 years of experience, focusing on sales leadership, academic partnerships, and institutional growth. As the Vice President of Academic Partnerships at Ripen, he collaborates with institutions to scale and manage experiential learning and work-based learning programs, driving student engagement and workforce readiness. Previously, Josh served as a Senior Director of Sales at Open LMS. He was the Vice President of Sales at eThink Education and Regional Sales Manager at MBS Direct, which is in my hometown, if anyone knows where that is. That's a trivia question. Josh holds a Master's of Public Administration and BA from Syracuse University. And I today am the MC for this session. I'm Mara Woody, the Director of Strategic Partnerships here at Ripen. I've worked in higher education for over 20 years at public and private higher education institutions within state government and now at Ripen, because I really believe in the impact that experiential learning can have on our learners' lives. I'm honored to be here today with Charles and Josh as we discuss integrating labor market data into innovative program design that really meets the needs of learners and society today. Next slide, please. So really quick, today we're going to structure this with a discussion around labor market data, learn a little bit more about Ripen and also how we tag Lightcast skills into our work now, and then have an interactive discussion and Q&A. Next slide. So start with a little bit of information about Ripen and Complete College America. Ripen's mission is to eliminate underemployment. We do that through educator partnerships, where we provide opportunities for learners to apply what they're learning in the classroom to real-world experiences, to engage authentic experiential learning projects, and build the skills that are needed today, both for personal and professional success. Next slide, please. And then we've been around for 10 years at Ripen. As you can see, we've worked with a lot of partners, hundreds of educational partners, and thousands of employers to create these authentic work integrated projects for learners. Next slide. And then Complete College America is a force for change in higher education. I've had the honor of being able to work with Complete College America for many years in my career in higher education. They not only work directly with institutions to innovate educational programming to transform the lives of learners, but it also amplifies and serves as a national catalyst for putting the needs of learners at the forefront of the educational experience. CCA works with many different entities, including folks like here at Ripen, to create bold initiatives that increase college access and completion, especially for underserved learners. Next slide, please. And so with that, we're going to launch our first poll. So the question is on here, and we're going to get that poll launched, so it should pop up on your screen in just a second. The question is, which data sources do you rely on the most for aligning programs with workforce needs? Now, you might see on here, you can select all that apply, but you might see on here some that you do use that are not on the list. Feel free to add those into the webinar chat, because what we really want this to become is an interactive session where everyone has the opportunity to learn from each other as much as from the experts that we have speaking today. So we're going to give everyone just a couple minutes to fill out this quick poll question. Which data sources do you rely on the most for aligning programs with workforce needs? And we'll give everyone just a second longer, and I'll rely on the person who's running the poll to be able to know when we've got some answers going in and when to set it up for everyone to see. I see a chat in here. I like this, the job calls on Indeed. Active alumni who give feedback. That's a great one. Being able to just pull from those alumni who are keeping them engaged, keeping them close to the institution. It's a great strategy for institutions. Okay, and so I think maybe we're ready now to see the poll results. Okay, most people are using government labor market data. That's great to see. Okay, about 65%. Also, and good thing we have this on here, what we're going to talk about today, we also see that some folks are using those third-party providers, and we have less of the industry reports, the employer feedback, and a couple of folks who aren't using a lot of resources right now, which is actually, that's great too, because then this is an opportunity to talk about some different resources out there that folks might not know about as much, and make sure that there's opportunities for everyone to be able to use those well. So then now let's go ahead and move over to Charles, who's going to dig a bit more into this labor market data and what can it be used for, how it can be used successfully, and how it can really be used to help institutions think strategically along how do we develop programs that are aligned with what our market needs right now. So with that, Charles, I'll let you take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Myra. Can we go to the next slide? I think, that was really helpful, that those poll results and what folks are putting in the chat. I'm going to try to weave that in as I'm going through these pieces. I think it's worth, noting up front, what I'm going to go over. Essentially 4 steps, right? Like in this specific area of, Mara did a great overview of CCA. And so, for us, we're talking about one thing that we do, which is, the specific area of making sure colleges and universities and systems and states are providing valuable programs. They're providing really strong student service to make sure that students can actually enroll onto those programs. And so those steps I'm going to walk through are essentially assuring overall program robustness, validating pathways through collaborative discussions, kind of embracing what we call a purpose-first approach to aligning program selection with student success and with equity, and integrating AI skills. I'm going to go over that as both cross-discipline in nature, but also representing new requirements for most academic pathways. So that's not depicted here. This is the first slide, and although these are kind of the basics, it's helpful to make sure you're not missing anything. I'm thinking about the people who responded to the poll, saying that you're using government data and also bringing in data from proprietary areas. What are the requirements that are dictating what data you want? I kind of view this as 80% of the ballgame on this slide, and it's very usual for colleges to not have all these components, or if they do, to not really regularly check in on them. So basically what we're saying here is that all academic programs should start with aligning with labor market demand and educational attainment requirements. So this means understanding at a high level what likely academic credentials should be on offer on a meta major basis. So like per focus area. So when I say meta major, I mean like business, IT, even, liberal arts or STEM. So you might call that an academy or a focus area in your environment. So once you start with that sort of alignment at the meta major level, then at the degree level, put primacy on pathways that lead to jobs with living wages. So this involves sourcing strong data, not just on what your state or region needs, but really on how much jobs will pay and what the career ladders look like. So these must ensure sufficient job openings at least 5 years in the future to justify program inclusion in your catalog, and making sure that all credentials should stack into further learning. So certificates can't lead to credit loss en route to an associate degree. Associate degrees, including in applied sciences, should still foster essential skills development, both for employers and for transfer to baccalaureate across all degree types. And finally, you can consider opportunities for micro-credentials, badges, and work-based learning. So, and we're going to go into that in from the other presenters. So to the right on this slide are two example pathways that emphasize stackability, one for advanced manufacturing, another for networking systems. You could have done this with almost anything as an example, but the point here is to show, again, certs leading to associates, to baccalaureate, to beyond, breaking the false dichotomy between transfer and workforce. That's kind of an assumption in this, in my presentation here. If we go to the next slide. So on the left is common data elements, right? Your jobs projections data, your stats required that include industry job projections by quantity, broken down regionally, by sector and educational attainment level. And this should be complemented by jobs postings and ads data and projected salary and wage information. So it seems like most people on the call are getting that through, government reports, but then also, that should be supplemented by proprietary information if you can afford it. So common data sources required to meet the basic needs for academic programming are the Georgetown Center for Education and the Workforce. They have wonderful per state reports broken down by educational level on what jobs are going to be needed where. By the year 2031, federal and local Department of Labor data, National Student Clearinghouse for transfer information for your associate students who go to bachelor's on to master's and further. And then obviously proprietary software services. So finally, on this slide, transfer and dual enrollment support should be built in to support the whole pathway, including beyond your institution. And the end results of this labor market analysis should be two things that you bring to a cross-sector meeting, which we're going to get into on the next slide. But first, a draft of stackable pathways, breaking down the false dichotomy that I mentioned between transfer and workforce, and the identification of key employers, transfer partners, and other advisors who can in fact confirm, modify, and perfect this draft that you're making. So you have to get all these people in the same room, or you can't be sure of confirmation. So if we go to the next slide, and I know I'm going fairly quickly here because I want to cover a lot of content in a little bit of time. But if there's anything to take away, it's like the first couple slides, I feel like most colleges and universities, like whether or not they have that comprehensive data view onto things and these requirements of what a good program is in their academic review process, I feel like the two parts where it falls apart are having really, really strong meetings to actually validate the research that you're completing, and then making sure that it's a comprehensive sort of engagement that brings all the partners into one place at the same time. So, with this, it's common to have, say, transfer partners in one meeting to discuss the full pathway from an associate degree to a bachelor's, or from a bachelor's to a master's, say. Less common are all higher ed sectors being in the room with an employer sector and representatives from that sector to construct the pathway together with institutional leadership and faculty there too, and high school. So you can have the conversations not just around credit for competency from the employer, but also dual enrollment from the high school. So the idea here is to have the credit value conversation and the credit mobility and transferability of credit conversation happening at the same time, right? With the same people. So we suggest here ensuring going over pathways at the meta major level. Again, the focus area or occupational cluster, IT, business, healthcare, even social sciences or humanities. Validate all those pathways at once. I kind of arbitrary 15 to 20 participants, but your draft academic pathways are based on the data and process described on the prior slides, and you're sharing with these people, right? You're confirming the market analysis. So once you get past that, Yeah, or you need to move to the next meeting, whatever, same people. You're collaboratively working on matching the competencies to the specific student learning outcomes. With transfer partners there, you can make sure that you break that false dichotomy between transfer and workforce. Even, in a community college, even the most vocationally leaning program can stack into, say, a bachelor's of applied science and, say, management. So by following this collaborative approach, you can ensure that the academic pathways are not only aligned with labor market demands, but also validated by industry experts and seamlessly integrated with transfer opportunities. Now, Complete College America, like as Mara said, as our name implies, we're in the business of getting students to complete their programs of study. And I'm going to focus on the next slide here on two things: building student purpose and building structured pathways, because I think that this is often left out of the value conversations. So can we go to the next slide? So you actually need advisors to be super well trained on your offerings, right? There are many colleges and universities that organize caseload advising into meta majors so they can build expertise in specific areas like IT or healthcare. And so they can connect on that like meta major basis with employers, with transfer partners, with faculty and others. But all students need to know of all options through mandatory exposure to them, whether in a first year course, first semester advising, or even at minimum, quick assessment through a career exploration tool required at application. If this isn't happening, then everything I just went through really just doesn't matter at all. Because then you'll just have, a nice, well-regarded, valuable program that doesn't have the students actually enrolling onto it, right? But the second thing, though, is to also make sure that the right math is in each pathway, right? So some pathways demand statistics, some quantitative literacy, some a calc route, some others. That requires, right, like the heads of each department and the head of the math department confirming this on a per pathway basis after employer input. So consider for all courses on a pathway, which can be offered, um, uh, looking as well, like going to the next bullets here, like in an online or hybrid model to expand geographic access across the system. And this also allows for system leaders of multiple colleges to consider a center of excellence model where programs that cost more to run are centralized, with some courses that are offered as part of other pathways those can go online, right? So then you're expanding access efficiently within a system. Finally, examine program enrollment and completion rates by demographics, especially by race, ethnicity, by gender, by Pell status, because who's enrolling in what based on wage outcomes expected for a given program can really help get at a gap examination and improvement for all students that you can't get at otherwise. The Community College Research Center and the Aspen Institute, and again, like this applies to 4 years as well, but they do great work here, right? Emphasizing the need to examine three things: the current description of enrollment and completion across programs, the opportunities and job prospects and earnings potential in each, and critically, the student subgroups. So like who's proportionally represented in high opportunity programs? Where are the gaps? Now I say all this before considering that AI is like totally reshaping the whole job market, disrupting workforce, disrupting the very courses we need to offer, that we need to teach, that students need to complete. So I'm going to close with two slides on how to handle this point. Knowing that this is all a bit much really quickly, I encourage you to reach out to me after the session if you have any questions or follow-ups. So if we go to the next slide. So this is from Educause. This is their illustration. This is their model. But I really like it. They had an article on the imperative to bring AI into what's clear here to be like a tripartite model of essential competencies. And they have here intelligent design skills, intelligent human skills, intelligent data skills. And as you see here, intelligent design skills focus on creativity, synthesis, digital literacy, logic, systems thinking. The intelligent human skills on ethics, critical thinking, and notably prompt engineering. And intelligent data skills I think that's fairly self-explanatory here. So the idea is that colleges and universities have to integrate these into curriculum now, not just to adapt to AI, but to actively shape AI's development, to actively shape its implementation. So we need to find places where AI, in some cases, replaces human capabilities, but find places where AI is, more often than not, enhancing human capabilities. And I'm suggesting that these are the types of things to examine for all programs. That's what this slide is about. But there is, of course, to that examination, a per pathway, a per program take that should be integrated into the meetings that I just discussed a couple slides back. So if you can imagine that, what would that look like? And so if we go to the next slide, This is a little text heavy, but the idea here is, we're saying that, you want to iterate that labor market analysis, right? But with an AI focus. Where is AI growing or expected to? So you need job posting data here specifically, and you probably want to review. I saw some folks, I want to say it was like 42% in the poll said, looking at industry reports. I would say for AI, like given how shaky the data is right now, how preliminary everything is, you probably want to review national industry reports here and forecast now as the data is still emerging more locally and on a per pathway basis. The big thing you're going to need is the employer feedback directly, right? So on the earlier description, I was saying that's important to have employers and educational partners. Here, I'm also saying to bring in AI-focused professional bodies as well. But yeah, then of course, bring in employers. See specifically for here, in the near term, on a per pathway basis, whether AI-specific micro-credentials or badges could make sense, and present draft AI-enhanced pathways at that meta-major level as described in the prior slides. Finally, um, integrate work-based learning opportunities. So if we go to the next slide, the idea here, is I'm going to toss it over, but AI is extremely ready for that, for the work-based learning opportunities. And my partners on the call are opinionated and expert on that notion, as well as on many other things. So it's my pleasure, my honor, my personal thrill to pass it back to Mara.
So, Shweta, if you'll go back one slide for us, please, because I'm going to put Charles on the spot. I know I said we were going to do questions at the end, and I lied. There are actually a couple of questions that came up in the chat while Charles was speaking that I feel like we want to hit on while he has that thread in his mind.
Okay.
And so, Charles, you explained during your presentation the false dichotomy. Can you talk a little bit more detail about that false dichotomy?
Yeah, I think that, and this comes from my experience working in community college systems. I do believe this also applies at the 4 years, particularly in the master's programs and stuff, is that you'll have these high capital intensity programs that are very labor market oriented at the associate degree level, at the certificate level. And the idea is like, okay, well, we're preparing those students for immediate job placement, and students that are in more obviously baccalaureate leaning programs in the case of community college, like AA political science, AS in engineering. It's like, okay, we're making sure our transfer team is hitting those students, or our advisors are thinking, do they have a transcript request in? So we have some sort of sense as to whether the transfer is going to happen. I'm putting forward that, I shouldn't say I'm, but it's that these programs that are more vocationally oriented still transfer, right? Now, I'm not saying they transfer everywhere and that every college and university is equally friendly when it comes to transfer, but there are always going to be within your state, and certainly at a national level with big behemoth players who can provide online baccalaureate degrees. I've seen bachelors in applied science and supply chain that stack on to transportation, distribution, logistics, bachelors in management that'll accept all your credits in your advanced manufacturing degree, inclusive of the 15 credits. It's usually much lower in an applied science degree that are going into that program. And there's no reason that we should think in one way about certificates stacking to a degree and not having the same stackability paradigm on degree to degree types. And if we do that, if we think of it that way, then we can worry a little bit less, or it somewhat mitigates the fact that some of these jobs with certificates and associate attainment that are more vocationally leaning can be automated away, and that's dangerous. And then you're sitting with a, a, a non-baccalaureate degree type when Georgetown has put forward that 80% of good jobs by 2031 will require a 4-year degree. So we have to make sure that that opportunity is equal to everybody, even if they're taking earlier on off ramps.
Okay, so then this one, I like this question. This wasn't a good one. And there's a couple people who have echoed it in the chat. I'm talking about false dichotomies. How do you change that equally false dichotomy between skills classes and content classes, where skills are taught in an uncontextualized vacuum, leading to a lack of skills transfer across domains?
I think there's a few things, right? I think so a couple things come to mind. So one thing is that on the transfer space where you're working on curriculum to make sure that the courses and the degrees that symbolize learning are transferring, very often you have to redo these articulation agreements all the time, every time a course changes, every time a catalog upgrades. So the more that you're looking at student learning outcomes on the transfer conversation, and you're pairing that with what I was discussing about breaking that false dichotomy between workforce and transfer, then you're more likely to see that blend because it's going to be reverse engineered from the ultimate transfer outcomes. I also think that, this is why you want to have employers and four-year partners in the room, right? Because we do a lot of lip service and all sorts of conversations and presentations as like, well, the same skills that are required for, say, AI, around like critical thinking and creative thinking, or the same things that are required in social science or the humanities, or the same things that are required for a healthy, thriving democracy, are also the things that employers demand. And I don't know why I'm doing it in this goofy way, because it's one of these cliches that are said all the time because it's like super true. But it's good to have the people who are saying those things in the same room at the same time, talking about it in a non-abstract way on a specific pathway, because then well, then it happens, right? Then you've got the right skills and the soft skills and the hard skills being paired up. And frankly, and I'm not using this to transition, but it can be, but like it goes into the types of service learning projects, frankly, that bring those out, right? The work-based learning project where you hear that message from employers.
It was almost a transition, but we actually have a follow-up question to what you were just speaking
Okay.
about being in the room, and then we'll be ready to transition. And so whenever you're reviewing those pathways by meta major with industry faculty and administration all in the room, it sounds great. But if there are like 20 pathways per meta major, how can this be done well and efficiently? And have you seen
Yeah.
it done well and within a reasonable timeline?
Uh, I'm just gonna say to the second question, yes, yes, I have. Like, and I can't just, that'll take too much time to start detailing all that. But the first part, right, is like I think maybe I was too general, but like so if it makes sense to split it up, right? So if you've got a meta major like business and it's actually kind of straightforward because it's just like accounting, marketing, business administration, maybe HR, maybe something else, like 5 or 6 different broad pathways with different attainment levels and different stackability on ramps, off ramps, do that. Healthcare, I could totally see. I think it's kind of common to do like a nursing and then all other like allied health professional type pathways in another area, right? And even that is like hopelessly complex because you're going to have, renal technology and medical billing and coding and respiratory, and it just might not make sense as a cluster. Whereas some, you might want to even pair up across, meta majors. So I guess the point is, though, is to not do it on a per pathway basis because these catalogs, when you're dealing with, programs that lead to immediate employment outcomes and career outcomes, those can be well over 100. It usually is, right? And so you'll want to like not be dragging the same people back for many, many different conversations on a one pathway here, one pathway there. Plus, the pathways within a major interlink. Ideally, for example, in business, the first year, semesters 1 and 2 could hopefully have the same courses, so students can pivot between different majors as they're choosing, right? So that's another reason to have it on that meta major or focus area basis.
Very great. Thank you, Charles. And thank you for humoring me while I wanted to make sure we got some of those timely questions taken care of
Yeah,
while you were still speaking. So
no,
we can go to the next slide and let's go ahead and do another poll. So hopefully with Charles's presentation, I can already tell in the chat and in the Q&A that there's lots of ideas, lots of questions, lots of conversation going. And so after he just spoke, what is the most valuable outcome you hope to achieve by integrating labor market data into your curriculum planning? We'll give everyone just a couple of minutes to answer that. And as we did earlier, if there's something in there that you're doing that isn't in the poll, go ahead and throw it into the chat. Again, that could become another discussion point we have later and an opportunity for folks to be able to learn from their colleagues who are all in this session today. And so again, what is the most valuable outcome you hope to achieve by integrating labor market data into your curriculum planning? I will say I saw that there were a lot of folks who responded at the beginning of the session talking about how to use the labor market data to be able to really plan into the curriculum planning component. And so we might structure that as a question at the end, is just what are some additional ways beyond what we see here and what folks put in the chat. So I'll say Charles and Josh look forward to that question coming up pretty soon. And so have we given enough time for folks to respond? Are we ready to go ahead and see the results? This one's going to be interesting. Okay, more relevant skills development. Okay, that one's good to know. And that might be something that we want to talk about at the end here is, how are folks using that for skills development? So thank you for everyone who was able to do that. Also, better job placement rates came in as well. In the chat, we had someone who spoke about increased enrollment. And then I really like this one talking about updating and revising curriculum to reflect new technologies. That one's pretty cool, especially as we start really thinking about how technology, how AI, how digital literacy, AI literacy, how all of those things are kind of intersecting at this moment. How are we really thinking about incorporating that into the classroom experience to prepare learners for how to use those tools well? So we'll go over to the next slide and I'll hand it over to Josh.
All right, thanks, Mara. So I think Charles really put this on a tee for me to kind of pick up now and run with. Although I combined two sports analogies there, that was poor. But really, what I'm gonna talk about now is how we facilitate giving learners, providing learners with opportunities to actually apply these skills. So the things that Charles just ran through, making sure that programs are aligned with what the workforce needs, the skills that are in demand. When it comes time for that learner to go look for a job, we know that there is the classic conundrum that it's difficult to get a job without experience, but it's difficult to get experience without a job. And that's really where work-based learning and experiential learning come into play. And so what we do here at Ripen is really just a slice of that. Of the spectrum of things that experiential learning can represent. Our slice is project-based learning opportunities where students are working sometimes as individuals, sometimes in groups on an authentic industry project with a real company, a real human being, getting valuable feedback and experience as they go. We find that to be a very flexible model that accommodates learners that maybe can't take an internship because of their life circumstances or otherwise, and one that's also very scalable. Most all of what we do are virtual projects, so it really provides our partners opportunities to plug gaps where they can't get learners experiential learning otherwise, or where it's difficult to scale those things. So that's really our approach here at Ripen. And Mara, if you continue on, I'll go through kind of how that works. So on the next slide here, I think what we'll have is just kind of an overview of the Ripen model. And these three buckets basically break down to match, manage, and report. So really central to what we do at Ripen is help our partners to articulate the kinds of projects that they want for their learners, the kinds of experience they're looking for their learners to have, and then find good fit projects with well-aligned companies that are going to help provide them with those opportunities. So that's the matching component. Really central to that is a two-sided marketplace. We have 41,000 companies on Ripen. We have tools to really facilitate the intake process of curating project opportunities from your existing network as well. So that's where the matching comes into play. Then the management and the collaboration. When you're doing this kind of work at scale, having oversight over what learners are doing, the interactions they're having as a group with their company, trying to keep tabs on whether or not they're being successful and if they are going sideways or need any help. Those just come down to oversight and collaboration kinds of considerations. And so there's a whole suite of tools in Ripen to be able to do all those things, to be able to monitor where students are, collect feedback along the way, be able to collect their deliverables and their milestones, and be able to then report on all of it, which is the last portion here. So our partners that are doing this kind of work at scale, they want to know what outcomes they're actually achieving, what impact are they actually having on student career preparedness and career confidence and clarity. They want to know what kinds of companies are we working with. They want to answer questions related to accreditation, things about, are we accomplishing certain UN sustainability goals, for example. All of those kinds of things. The Ripen platform really facilitates tracking all of that systematically, collecting data as well from learners and from companies to be able to round out that data set and be able to then visualize all of that with BI tools. So that in a nutshell is the start to finish process of how Ripen works here. And what I'm going to take you through next, Mara, if you want to click to the next slide, or whoever's driving, I apologize, it's not Mara that's driving, is where we're really aligning on the industry needs and the skills in particular. So what we've done here at Ripen, we just announced this via press release a few weeks ago, but we've actually had this in place now for about a year, is we have integrated with Lightcast and their open skills library. And so these skills, the Lightcast taxonomy of skills, come into play in several different spots in Ripen. And I'm going to walk you through that here over the next couple of slides, but they begin with when I talked about, we work with a faculty member to identify the kinds of projects they want, or really articulate the kinds of companies they want to work with and what skills they want learners to apply. There are skills then on that particular piece of content in Ripen, which is called an experience. Those come out of Lightcast. The same skills also appear on the project side. So when companies are engaging and they're creating project scopes, they are also identifying skills. One of the things we do then is we have AI tools to compare those two things to make recommendations to our academic partners about whether or not projects seem aligned with what they're looking for or not. That's the middle part there, improved matchmaking. And then finally, giving learners opportunities to be able to have those skills verified by the industry partners that they're working with, and actually have those on their profile. That happens at the end in the form of feedback, which I'll show you a little bit more closely here as we go. If we want to click on to the next. So what you're seeing, I realize this is very small, and you're not really going to be able to see everything here that's moving on the screen. But what you're seeing is what an experience page looks like on Ripen. This is essentially, I said before, this is the content type. These are courses. This is a course, I believe, at Florida International University. I think it's in marketing, perhaps, where we worked with this instructor to spec out all the things I just mentioned. What kinds of projects did she want her students to have? Well, how many hours were they going to spend in their project? Were they going to work in groups or in team or individually? What kinds of projects does she have in mind? What skills is she looking for her learners to be able to apply in doing these projects? And that's the call out there at the bottom. So the skills that are associated with this particular experience are all pertaining to marketing. These, again, are out of the Lightcast taxonomy. And these are the skills that she's identified and that our tools in Ripen have recommended to her as we are helping her to develop this page. These are the skills ultimately that she was looking for learners to apply in their projects. And so if we go on to the next, we'll see the project side of where this comes into play. So this is an example of a project page. Again, the text here is very small, but on a project page in Ripen, the company is able to basically identify goals and deliverables for the project they have in mind. They give some sense of the commitment level that they have in mind. They give a little bit of information about their company, and then they also are identifying skills, and the system is recommending appropriate skills to them that they are likely to have learners demonstrating in doing this project. A couple of slides ago, the middle portion of that showed the improved matchmaking. So literally what the system is then doing is comparing these two pieces of content to make a recommendation to the educator about, does this look like a good fit project based on skills alignment and other things? So that's where that comes into play. And now finally, and I think most importantly, if we go to the next slide, where this then lands at the end of this process is when the learner has gone through and completed their project, they've submitted their deliverables. What happens at the end is the employer gives them feedback. That feedback consists of some core soft skill kinds of things that we ask of all projects on Ripen. There's also written feedback. There can be customized feedback that our partners are looking for, perhaps on very technical kinds of things relevant to that particular project. But they are also then indicating the skills that those learners or that learner demonstrated in completing their project. So there's a call out there at the bottom as well. That's actually one from a learner's profile that did multiple projects. So that's why you see the number 6, for example. They had those particular skills validated by 6 different employers and 6 different projects. So on any individual feedback level, you wouldn't see those numbers, but in the aggregate on a learner's profile, if they've done multiple projects, you can see that they can have those skills validated multiple times. So what that learner can then do is they can go put that on their LinkedIn profile The Ripen profile that you're looking at here can be linked to their LinkedIn profile. They can put it on their CV. And these now become employer validated skills against the industry standard taxonomy that Lightcast is. And I think that is very powerful when that learner is now going and applying for jobs, well-aligned jobs that are in demand in the industry, as those programs have been developed with that in mind. And that makes them more competitive when they're out there looking for really meaningful employment. I think that might be the end. I'm back now to you, Mara, to facilitate some live discussion.
Awesome. Can we go back one slide, please? Because Josh, there are questions specifically for you two based off of your presentation. And then after we get those questions answered, we'll go into a more open discussion with everybody. So the first question for you, Josh, do you find that faculty use your services in a semester by semester timing? So a project is planned in advance and used in the following semester. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's essentially right. So the matchmaking process is central to what happens on Ripen, and that does take a little bit of time. So our best practice is that experience page gets published out to the marketplace at least about 6 to 8 weeks in advance of when those projects need to be ready to go. And that's the window of time that allows that to happen.
Awesome. Okay. And so then the next question, kind of based on that as well, is how long does a project last? Can it be, or how long does it last in days, hours, weeks? What do we see? What do we see as typically the norm?
So I think at the end of the day, that length of the project, as well as the number of hours someone is going to spend, so the sort of intensity of the project, it depends on the class. We see capstone courses, we see 2-semester capstone courses, where that is all of the content for that particular capstone, and they might be several hundred hours in duration. And then we see much shorter term projects that might only last 3 or 4 weeks out of the 15-week semester. They might only be 12 or 15 hours. I would say there's a bell curve. At the top of the bell curve is the neighborhood of 50 to 60 hours. And then those much shorter term and much lengthier projects sort of fan out to the left and the right. But that's the typical.
And I'll go ahead and throw in there that in some of our programs that we develop with strategic partners, we see that in those, they're a little bit more employer workforce development focused in how we run and launch those programs. Employers tend to like projects that are 40 hours or more in those types of programs. And so just kind of throwing out there is there's the classroom experience, but then also you can take into account your employer partners that you're working with and how many hours that they would see as beneficial into a project. So then the next question for Josh is, so a real company has a project that needs to be completed. They post that need within the Ripen marketplace. Then on the other side of the marketplace, we have faculty with a desire for a real company project and a course. And they get with Ripen. So we've got 2 different folks that have gotten with Ripen. And then that project gets used in real life between that employer and that faculty person through our matching system. Is that correct? And is there anything that needs to be fleshed out a little bit more on that?
That is essentially correct. So I guess in my very brief spiel, we conveyed what we wanted to accurately. Yeah, they're essentially on the educator side, and these don't have to be course-based, by the way. We have many partners that also run co-curricular kinds of things on Ripen. But whatever that looks like, I think the key is that they are project-based, not role-based. So these are not internship positions where someone's coming into an office for several hours a day. There is a scope of work and deliverables and discrete tasks. So that's really what distinguishes, I think, the Ripen model. On the other side, these are typically small and medium-sized companies is what is most common on Ripen, nonprofits. Those are the kinds of organizations, quite frankly, that are too small to participate in internship programs. They don't have the resources to do it. So working with students in a project-based format is also a good fit for them. And they typically are bringing nice to have kinds of projects, things they'd love to have the opportunity to explore or pursue, but don't have the time. And so what they're able to do is they're able to use Ripen to create that project scope and then go find academic partners that are willing to work with them on that represent a good opportunity for them to apply the skills that they're looking for. One thing I'll point out is the challenge to doing that from a company perspective is creating the actual project scope. There are lots. We probably have many colleges on this call right now that are doing this kind of work out of their own Rolodex. And one of the most challenging parts of that is actually getting a well crafted project scope that is clear, that's going to avoid scope creep. So that's a big part of what we facilitate at Ripen. We have an AI generative tool that we have developed and continue to develop, where a company just has to type in a prompt for what their goal is for the project, and it will then develop the bones of a project scope with tasks, with deliverables to help them get further down that path. So hopefully that covers enough of that question. And Mara, I don't know if you're ready now for live Q&A or discussion, but I'll stop.
Yeah, got one more question for you, and then we'll go to the live Q&A, because some of these actually become a question for all of us. Do you find repeated postings from companies? So if they posted a project once, do they come back again?
Absolutely. We have a lot of companies that are very active on Ripen that are coming and they're looking to identify talent on Ripen. They're looking to hire. They're looking to use projects as a way to identify talent that they might want to extend a job offer to. Many companies use Ripen in that way. It's not just to get some help in their business, but they actually want to feed their talent pipeline. So many companies are very active, come back again and again. These are authentic projects, so it's not as though they bring back the same project, because if they've already had that business need answered, they don't want to run it again, unless it is purely from a talent identification standpoint. But certainly iterating on a particular question, exploring other opportunities to answer other questions in their business, I think that's the most common thing that we see.
Awesome. Okay, so now I'll go ahead and pitch it to questions for both Charles and Josh to answer. You either both can chime in as you want, one or the other, but I'm going to start with one that I really like, because it's really taking exactly what we want to see happen in higher education, all of us, and really thinking about how do we really maximize the work what we're doing. So the question is, what are the ways we can update our typical notions of workforce experiences and career exploration for students? And I'll pitch that over to Josh and to Charles, and then maybe I'll add in something too for some fun.
Go ahead, Josh.
I was going to say, I think I need to see that question in writing, Mara. I need to digest that a bit. Do you want to go first, Charles?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think a lot of it goes into what I was trying to, convey during my portion, right? But I think the first thing is, there's nothing that's there's nothing magical about the way that we've set up so much of higher education, right? Like it's based on, an agrarian economy mindset with lots of tropes from, Europe in the Middle Ages. And so I think we inherit those things and they play out in weird ways in our, I don't even know what we're living in now, but the post-pandemic information age economy of AI explosion. And I think, so the first thing, right, is to like get rid of the conventional notions around, okay, well, what needs to be symbolized in these degrees or certificates. I kind of view programs like and these like credentials, like a degree, as like a box, and all the learning goes into the box, and the box itself doesn't matter, right? As long as it like can carry from one place to another. So I think the first thing is to like make sure that we are flexible in meeting the moment. I think if higher ed doesn't do that, then I think about the VP debates, right, and the presidential debates in this election cycle where, for example, I'm not picking or making a statement about, anything partisan here. I'm just quoting back in the debate when Harris says, I don't think all jobs are going to need to require a college credential or degree. I think if higher ed doesn't get smart quickly around breaking down conventions on degrees and certificate types, I think that the market for prospective students will just do that for us. The second thing is kind of, the other part that I was kind of leaning into, but just I think that this is AI is a huge accelerant of all of these things, right? And so it's difficult because by the time we have the data on how AI is disrupting workforce, it'll be too late, right? So I think that we need to go now through industry experts, particularly in AI itself, to understand what the projections are and like how we're embedding competencies, including through the type of service learning that Ripen does and the work-based projects and the things that Josh went through. Like AI needs to be embedded in those sorts of things specifically. And we need to stay super flexible because right now all the skills are I kind of walked through that EDUCAUSE thing, which was, more comprehensive than most, but so much of it's like double clicking super hard on prompt engineering. We don't know if in a year from now, prompt engineering is going to matter that much. So we've got to like really have trusted partners with whom we can agilely react. Um, hope that mostly answered the question.
Yeah, and I think I'll add a little bit to that as well, kind of taking maybe a little bit more of a high level approach to it, but just in my experience working in education, what we often see whenever we talk about workforce experience career exploration is that sometimes it's disjointed and it's not built intentionally where it builds on itself. And so that includes for us, especially what's happening in that K-12 arena and what's being done to help make sure students are aware of the different options that are out there. Everyone says the same things, teacher, lawyer, doctor, because those are known. How do we make sure that at younger ages, more and more learners know what are the different opportunities out there to really be able to hone in? And then building on, first you start out with that awareness, then you give them opportunities to test different things, see what kind of work they enjoy doing. If that's what they enjoy, you build on that and then you continue on that, because that then can help inform what that college major becomes or what that program is that they want to do in post-secondary education that may be non-credentialed. And then you build on that in the higher ed where it keeps becoming more complicated, where they keep doing more and new things to really help figure out what is that area I want to go into once I complete my post-secondary study at whatever level that may be. And then also building on that is just the idea of really making sure that learners are well connected in the environment. And so the idea of social capital, especially as we serve learners who have just historically been underserved in education, how do we not only enable them with the skills in order to know what they do well, what they love to do, to be able to empower them to find those jobs they love, but how do we also help them get the right connections with employers out there so they can find those critical mentors, they can find those folks that really believe in them and want to see them be able to move forward in their careers? How do we also provide opportunities for that? So it takes that awareness piece that we see some folks doing and really building on that and creating an intentional pipeline that starts well before they ever get to college and expanding it further whenever they do go on to their post-secondary study. And so I'll stop there or else I'll go on forever. Is there...
Mara, can I address one of can I just really hit, I'll
Yeah.
be super quick. The question in the chat there though. So somebody put like, how do, Christine, not somebody, how does one accelerate, faculty and administrative mindsets to acknowledge the new normal? I think the answer almost always is it has to be in the details. It can't be abstract. It can't be like what I just said. It has to be, this is your pathway, right? And like, here's the data I'm seeing on your stuff, on your classes. Otherwise it just doesn't stick. Or it can stick, but like you're building a coalition of the willing when you need everybody. So I would go in the details.
I actually was gonna touch on that question as well, Charles. So I'm glad you called that out, because I think the reality is that all of the data is telling us that this is what learners, even the 18-year-old college going traditional student and their parents, this is what they're looking for. They're looking for a clear path to employment. They're looking to understand the outcome that they can expect with their degree. And in particular, in certain parts of the United States, I live in Pennsylvania. In this part of the country, the college going rates are declining. So, colleges have to be competitive for students. We've known that forever, but it's turned from not just what dining hall and athletic facilities do you have, but, what are you going to demonstrate is my ability to take this degree I earn and go get a job with it. So using this data to be able to align programs with what the market is looking for, give students an opportunity then to gain real experience that is going to make them more employable, and then demonstrating that back to prospective students. That increasingly, I think, is what it's all about for colleges that are going to survive and thrive. And if you think back to the springtime, it's slowed now as we get into the fall, but it'll heat up again next spring, I'm sure. Especially in a state like Pennsylvania, there were several colleges that simply went out of business in the spring. You couldn't read inside higher ed any week through the springtime without seeing an article about a college that closed or that was threatening to close or that had to develop a teach-out plan. So this is the reality. And when we talk about accelerating administrators to embrace these things, the market needs to do that or will do that, or colleges will go out of business.
And there's a really interesting question here that I think Josh, Charles, and I will all enjoy answering. And so I want to get this one answered as well. Someone had made the comment in the Q&A, it sure makes them wonder about general education required courses that don't have a clear direct connection to the major. And how often, I wonder just how separated should the classes be in our future? And one of the things I'll start with is saying there could be both, either or, and. Some programs, it should all be connected into one short-term program. Because let's say instead of a 4-year degree, maybe it's the career pathway is, I need this certificate to get to this, then I need this certificate to get to this. And then that enrolls into a degree. So it might be incorporating that all into what we understand as one course today. I think also there are a lot of discussions, and I would love to find partners who want to think about preparing for workforce development and skills of the future intentionally across an entire program to include general education, meaning that general education, even though those values that we believe in general education, critical thinking, communication, teamwork, you can still have experiential learning opportunities that are still relevant to potential majors in those courses without having to change the content of those courses or the curriculum. That then ties into that major, where then you can also build experiential learning opportunities in that major that are building on what's learned earlier, and then really being able to expand that and really help hone in and really be able to develop those skills and learn more about those career fields. And I'll kick to Charles and Josh, and I think we're being told we're going to go over. So I'll kick to Charles and Josh for their answers on that one as well. And then I think we'll have to close up after that.
I want to make sure. So, well, two things. So, do you mind boiling down the question there? And then the second thing is, there was I want to address one of the questions that's in the chat about a comment I made about how 80% of jobs of good jobs are by 2031 are going to require a bachelor's degree, and what that means for micro credentials and AI. And to me, it's like, I just don't know, right? I think, on the one hand, you get these projections, and I do believe that they are good, and I think what Georgetown's doing is good, and so I don't doubt that. And then on the other hand, you have a movement that's increasingly expressing less confidence in higher education and expressing frustration with an over-credentialization, particularly not at the cert side and stuff, but on like the graduate degree side of things. And so I think you have to prepare for both, where you are on the one hand making sure that we're doing what we were talking about today with like labor market analysis and preparing on a very specific basis, but then at the same time making sure that everything is ultimately stackable to the baccalaureate program. So then that way you're hedging your bets on behalf of your students. I maybe I'm being overly simplistic when I say I don't know if there's another or better approach. I don't know if anybody has anything to add on that piece. And then Mara, please, if I missed your question, or Josh, if you've got it right, please go for it.
Well, I think we actually have some interesting things going on here at Ripen that are related to the question, which was about general education, but I'll generalize it more to also be about arts and humanities, and how those kinds of degrees, which are not historically, career in nature, how you can still think about, well, how do we align those with skills that are relevant for the workforce, and allow a student that is pursuing a degree in history to still be able to contemplate what they would want to do with that degree other than continue in academia. So we have a program, for example, with the Consortia of Independent Colleges right now, which are small private liberal arts schools by their nature, where we're working with 25 of them. And the whole point of the program is to incorporate work-based learning into the arts and humanities. We've gone through the first year of those courses. We're preparing for the second. We actually, here's a shameless plug, we have a webinar coming up in early December on that exact topic, which I don't think we have anything here for you to register on that yet, but stay tuned. And I think it's a really relevant one, because it's about making sure at the end of the day that the arts and humanities remain relevant. We have several clients I can think of as well that are looking at different kinds of specialized programs and initiatives where they are providing work-based learning opportunities that are meant to be career exploratory. How do I take these skills I'm learning that are not directly connected, as far as I know, to certain careers, and think about what I might do with them, and actually have an opportunity to practice putting those skills into practice and decide, is that a career I'd really like? Those are things that we're doing with several clients right now. So hopefully, I'm conscious of time. We're almost at the end here. Wanted to just plant a few seeds there. But that's some really interesting stuff that we see going on right now.
And we have just now hit up on time. And so this was a great discussion, tons of questions we did not get to today. And so we're going to get all those questions compiled, get answers. I think some of them may also inform future webinars that we want to hold. So stay tuned for more webinars to come out with more information. Thank you, everybody, for the incredible questions. And we have put the QR codes for both Complete College America and Ripen into this session. We've just kind of been going back and forth while we've been talking. So that way you can find out more information about us. Please feel free to reach out at any time if you have any questions or you want to explore more. And this was a great session. Thank you, everybody. We will send out the information following this presentation. And so look forward to talking with everyone in the future. Thank you. Take care.
Bye, everybody.